Okay, good afternoon and welcome to Filmfest Ghent. And I think this hall is full of people who not only like watching movies, but even more like listening to movies. Am I right? Yes. More specifically, listening to the soundtrack. Well, that's the reason why we're here during the World Soundtrack Days at Filmfest Ghent to talk about film music. And more specifically about the tendency of electronic waves in minimalist film music. And I'm very happy to have these three musicians, composers also here with us. Please give them a warm welcome. Emilie Levienaise-Farrouch, Martin Phipps and Hugh Tieppo-Brunt. Amélie, Martin, Hugh, how are you?
Good. Very well,
Yeah,
thank
good.
you.
Did you already have the chance to discover Filmfest Ghent a bit, to attend some movies, talks or concerts? I think it's a pretty busy schedule for you, right?
Yeah, I don't get a chance at all
Yeah,
to do
okay.
that, sadly. But it's great to. I love this town. It's
Yeah.
so lovely.
And you, Hugh?
I've been here for one night. I'm going back this afternoon, sadly, but really enjoyed the concert last night and chatting to lots of good folk and meeting new people. So yeah, it's been a lovely couple of days.
Amélie?
Yeah, it's also my first time coming here, and I think what's really special is that it's rare to see so many like composers and other people who love film score in such a. It's nice to have a community like that,
Yeah.
so I'm really enjoying it.
And your music both will be performed this evening on a World Soundtrack concert. Looking forward to the concert. Apparently, another place to be when you're in Ghent as a film composer is the Hotzi Totzi. You've heard about it?
We wouldn't know anything.
I'm living
about
it right now.
So that's the local bar where everyone's hanging out until early in the morning, right? You did? No. Okay.
that. Yes.
But I just live around the corner, so next time, maybe this evening, I'll be there as well. Okay, let's start with something very simple to get to know each other a bit. Amélie, Martin, Hugh have prepared some questions or sentences that you should answer or complete. We will start with you, and Martin, Hugh. Nice, huh? Okay. First question. My name is...
Emilie Levienaise-Farrouch.
Martin Phipps.
Hugh Tieppo-Brunt.
You might know me from...
Writing scores to all of us strangers living in Cobe.
You'll know me because I'm always here, every year.
You probably won't know me at all, but recent projects I've worked on have been One Battle After Another, Hamnet, and Begonia.
My all-time favorite movie is...
Blue in the Three Color Blue trilogy.
Martin?
Oh. There Will Be Blood.
Okay, I was going to say that, so I'm going to go for its slang, Metropolis.
Yeah.
The new one or the old one?
The old one, 28 was it? With the original score, Gottfried Huppert's. Yeah.
I decided to become a film composer or a film music director because...
Because I was at university with film students and they asked me to score their short film.
I was at university doing drama, and I was so bad at it that I got to get out of acting. I started doing the music for the plays.
I sort of fell into conducting film scores through the man that Martin just alluded to, Johnny Greenwood, because we were performing some of his concert work, and then he asked us to record his second project with Paul Thomas Anderson as The Master. So that was the first score I worked on 12 years ago or so.
Some people think composing is just waiting for inspiration, but the golden key to great film music is...
Understanding the film language in general, not just the music.
Not panicking.
How's that relevant for what I do, I wonder? I mean, just... what's the question again? Sorry, Simon.
Some people think composing is just waiting for inspiration, but the golden key to great film music is...
I don't create it, but I try and facilitate it by bringing together good people and understanding working as part of a team and serving the greater good of the project, of the production.
Mm-hmm. This is how my day as a composer or musician looks like.
Depends on the day.
Yeah.
Like, take too long to get ready. So I go to the studio, work for 8 to 10 hours, get home, and do it again.
Yeah, it's just a battle during the day. One battle after another during the day of not looking at pet videos or generally getting distracted. So, but otherwise, it's just the same every day.
Yeah, it's normally pretty varied depending what projects we've got coming up, what scores I have to learn, what I'm orchestrating. But it usually means just trying to get up as early as possible and getting through as much as quickly as I can.
My most favorite instruments in the orchestra.
In the orchestra, well, piano counts. Yeah, piano.
Okay.
I'd have to say French horn, wouldn't I? Yeah.
Cello.
My least favorite instrument.
Don't want to make enemies. Oh, just a bit. Okay.
What was your one? You're not answering. Okay. Most useless instrument in the orchestra. Yeah.
I didn't say it.
Yeah. Least favorite.
Or most difficult one to compose for.
Yeah. Something quite farty, like tuba is really hard to make work, but some people have.
Yeah.
No, I think if deployed well, they can all serve. They all have a place. I'm not hating on any instruments.
Sorry for the tough questions. A few lasts. A moment in my career which I'm very proud of is...
Well, I guess maybe the first film you get to school. I think the first picture you get and you see it for the first time on a big screen, I think that's a special thing, especially in guitar.
The most recent thing you've done?
It'd probably be the recording sessions for the master, because that was the first film that the LCO worked on, and that was just a really special moment, and then it kickstarts our relationship with Johnny Greenwood. So yeah, we owe a lot to that one.
Yeah. So my last question: if you should listen to one track of one of my projects, then you probably could listen to
When the Time Comes from Living.
I'm going to go War and Peace, just as a score.
I'm going to pick a film, probably one of the most recent, I'd say Justin's score for Begonia, which isn't out just yet, but it'll be well worth a listen. It'll be incredible.
Okay. Thank you, Amélie, Martin, Hugh. Thank you. Give them a warm applause. Okay, so last night we had the World Soundtrack Awards at the Berocke in Ghent, a wonderful concert hall, and tonight we're all looking forward to another concert, Minimalism in Motion, with music by Philip Glass, Michael Nyman, and of course with your music as well. Philip Glass and Michael Nyman, they both received this year's Lifetime Achievement Awards. Why are they so important to you as film composers?
Okay, I've been quite kind of on the record. It's Michael Nyman that got me into the idea of what could happen when you put music to film, and he was a great inspiration in that. And literally just seeing the draftsman's contract.
This was 1982, right?
I don't think I saw it till maybe a bit later than that, but yeah. Okay. I just saw it on TV. It just happened to be on TV in my house, and I came in and there was that cue when they're chasing sheep, and it was just like film music like I'd never heard before. It was kind of classical rock and roll. Had the most amazing attitude and simplicity, and I think just because, I think we're probably going to talk about this tonight at the concert, but it was just before that, film music was something very different. It was a lot of pseudo-classical music that was very quite gentle and underscory, and suddenly there was this punk rock of quartet, bashing out these four chords with an incredible intensity, and that was just an eye-opener for me.
Hugh, you've worked also with Philip Glass. Why is he such an important composer, and also Michael Nyman? Why are they important as film composers?
Yeah, I also share Martin's love of the draftsman's contract, and particularly in how Michael Nyman, not just through that score, but through many of his works, reimagines, sort of repurposes old material, particularly from the Baroque period, and intense curiosity, fascination with the music of Henry Purcell and William Croft. And I think Philip Glass, that's also relevant in some respects, thinking the two pieces that I worked with him on, which were the Bowie symphonies, Low and Heroes, and again, how he's repurposing existing material and throwing new light on it, reimagining it, sculpting it in a new way, and transforming it through his language. I think they're both incredible at doing that.
Amélie, you're a classical trained pianist as well. Yeah. You have a special connection with Philip Glass's piano etudes.
Yeah. I mean, for me, Philip Glass came at a time when it was quite clear I would never be a concert pianist. And I think it was lovely to come across music that didn't necessarily have this obsession with being a virtuoso, because there is a simplicity to it, and it's a lot easier to play, but then you have to shift your focus into putting something else into the music, which is not about how fast you can play, how like crazy technical you could play. And that kind of changed my life in that sense, because before that, I was limiting myself in my understanding of music through focusing on technique. And coming across those etudes, the metamorphosis and stuff like that allowed me to realize you can write and perform beautiful music even if it's on the more simple side of things.
Yeah, it's quite a statement actually, those very easy, beautiful pieces. Which inspires you as well as a film composer?
Well, it completely informed my musical practice after discovering them. It changed what I was focusing on.
Could you say that Glass and Nyman, that they laid a foundation for a really new genre of film music?
Of music in general, yeah.
Yeah. And in films?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I mean, just the way that directors were drawn to them and would either employ them or get someone else to copy them repeatedly shows what an impact they had on the film industry.
Yeah. What's your inspiration, or how does Michael Nyman inspire your film music, or your way of thinking, way of composing, way of finding melodies, finding the right instrumentation?
Can I find something as characterful but simple as what he does, or what Philip Glass does? I mean, it's the same. It's an ability to do more with less. Is just always an inspiration, and when you hear something which is so powerful, but you're going, this is so simple. How come I'm not bored? Or I mean, some people do get bored by it, but I don't. I love simple repetition that builds. I mean, that's for me just the heart of a kind of beating heart of a lot of scores and a lot of music when it really works. So it's just seeing if I can recreate that idea in some shape or form.
How would you define minimal music? Because it's music that is still going on. It started in the 60s. Now, 60 years later, we still have this new generations of film composers writing in a minimalist style. I think also that's one of the reasons why you're sitting here. So, looking at your own process, also own experiences in conducting music by composers, how would you define minimal music?
I suppose on a very basic level, it's about stripping the musical elements down to their barest forms, you know, the sort of DNA of music through rhythm, simple harmonic language, repeated figures, repetition, and creating something that almost no matter what instrument it's played on, it speaks. You know, it has an emotional quality, so whether that's on a little toy keyboard or it's orchestrated out for 90 players, it's about being able to distill an idea and for it to work in the most sort of economical form and being incredibly resourceful with limited material.
Amélie, do you agree, or do you have something?
I really agree.
Yeah. If you look at your own music, why could you agree that you're, in a way, a minimalist composer?
Well, I think it's a bit. I don't know if I would call myself a strict minimalist composer. I think it's more the way it kind of influenced your trajectory, and then you kind of let go even of the rules of minimalism, and you just, you know, I'm not actively sitting at the keyboard trying to write minimalist music, but it definitely echoes in what I write, especially in terms of the harmonic language and the simplicity. Yeah.
Martin?
I mean, I just sort of coming back to this idea that how can you do something with something so simple, and how do you get away with it? I mean, the thing with something like Philip Glass is he's almost copyrighted a minor arpeggio, you know,
Yeah.
and that in itself is such an astounding feat that you can hear a minor arpeggio and go, oh, you're immediately thinking of Philip Glass, and that is, and I regularly curse him, you know, it's like, what do you mean I can't do that? Because that sounds, I mean, I can do that. That's normal. That's just, but it's so anyone who can achieve that kind of level of simplicity and yet immediate connection that you it just speaks to you straight away, and you know who it's from and what it's saying. That's how, I say, just, you know, that's how I would try and incorporate it.
Mm-hmm. The term minimal music comes from the minimal art movement, actually, from the 1960s. It was also called ABC art. Artists like Richard Serra, Ceulaer, Donald Judd, who actually went back to basic. Do you also go back to basic when starting a new score? Like, you have so many ideas, and then actually going back to the essence, or how is it? How do you work in a minimalist way in the studio?
I mean, it's always back to basics when I'm starting. It's like, it's a blank page, and, you know, I mean, it's interesting. I don't work with a template, so I don't have loads of instruments already in there.
Okay.
And so, in a sense, it's about going right back to nothing and seeing and trying to pick one thing that works in that. But, you know, doesn't always work. But yeah, and I don't know many chords either, so it really helps doing minimalism when you don't actually, you know, it's I'm forced to work with what I know, and in a way it's about making what you know work well. So,
Amélie?
No, I'm with Martin in the starting from a blank page,
Okay.
not having preloaded sounds and just, you know.
It's not coming from maximalism, actually.
Yeah. But I don't know. In terms of how it influences the process, yeah, I think it's just discovering smaller patterns or smaller sounds that could become a building block of your score, and just maybe more focusing on finding all the small building blocks than finding the really long melody first. Yeah.
Hugh, as a conductor of all those music, Philip Glass, also the new music Begonia, Joskin Fendricks, you just recorded this piano concerto with Hanya Rani, and also Johnny Greenwood premieres. How would you describe the evolution of composers, musicians working with minimalists, with small blocks to build a new piece? How do you see, because you also worked with Philip Glass, how do you see this evolution in conducting and orchestrating scores?
Yeah, well, I think Philip Glass, on the level that Martin describes, and Michael Nyman have obviously had a huge impact on how people approach musical material, but also in terms of the orchestration, when there are kind of limited germs of material, but then how those are coloured and built upon, and how the orchestration can become incredibly dense, but if you strip it back, it's still the same core element at the heart of it. And so in that respect, in thinking of Hanya's project, some of the way in which she approaches her material is, she would probably say, is in a minimalist fashion, but then the way that she creates atmospheres of textures around that material, so it could just be a central kind of a through piano line that's fairly basic, but and harmonically quite simple. But then the sort of dimensionality, the space that she builds in the orchestra around that piano line is incredibly fascinating. And it means that even if there's the regularity of a beautiful piano arpeggio, there's something that's evolving in the air around it through, you know, what the back desk of the strings are doing, or a combination of contrabass flutes or bass recorders and double basses playing together to create something quite singular. So there's always motion, there's always movement, but it's underpinned by the regularity of a sort of a minimalist principle.
Yeah. It's interesting what you're saying about the orchestration, because when I think of Philip Glass, also John Adams, in big orchestral pieces, I hear these accents in the brass, for instance, lots of fast violin parts, subtle melodies in woodwinds. Are there specific instruments in the orchestra or specific instruments that you're using in your film music, which are very, very nice to use in minimalist music?
Well, I mean, string arpeggios.
Yeah.
You can't. It sounds so great. You know, why wouldn't you want to use them? But you've got to be careful, and if you've got to try and find a way of doing something a little bit different with them. I mean, the rhythm thing you're talking about is a very particular element of minimalism, that kind of driving pulse stuff that can be very insistent, and some people find infuriating, and other people's love.
Mm-hmm.
It's very divisive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to find something. I mean, I think a point I wanted to raise was I think the evolution of technology kind of almost, because minimalism started off with Philip Glass and Michael Nyman, they're all playing stuff live.
Yeah.
So all of this stuff is live, and then technology sort of arrives in the 90s, and sequences are there, and they're kind of doing the same thing that they're doing. You know, it's very easy to do what they would do with the players. And it lent itself towards that, so we were kind of getting quite a push back towards that. But it doesn't sound the same as you've got the idea of. I mean, you'll hear tonight of people playing something live to literally a synthesizer, like repeating and looping something is not going to sound the same. So, sort of, you know, something you're aware of when you're writing.
Mm-hmm. But that's interesting because many minimalist composers, they started using electronic instruments.
But usually played live initially, anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, right.
Come out, the Steve Reich one, which is a loop of a recording, and it is this repeated loop that's quite short, that's creating a rhythm. Or even, again, like Steve Reich, all this piano phase, which then it turned into really incredible, really hard to perform piano
live
stuff that comes from exploring phasing between tape loops. So I kind of feel like the aesthetic of minimalism is probably enmeshed with really early 60s recording techniques.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily in a DAW, but like in a, you know.
It's interesting because when looking at Mozart or Beethoven, their music is evolving because the instrument is evolving. Beethoven had, I think, almost 2 octaves more at the piano than Mozart. So if you look at this minimalist music in the 60s, I mean, the recording techniques, it's like the Beatles. The recording albums are getting better because of the quality. So Steve Reich is using tape. Philip Glass is using his Farfisa organs, which he bought for $50 somewhere. How are you embracing technology today to make music of today?
The laptop is just the most important instrument of the past 30 years. It's completely changed what people can do with music, and I just love the mix of the humanity of someone playing an instrument and then adding what technology can bring, how you can shape and manipulate the sound and just tell a whole story just from effects, just, you know, amplifying the basic emotion that's been put in by a performer. Mm-hmm. So it's just handlessly buying plugins and trying to see how I can make them work together, and just I think it becomes a very, very sculptural approach to the sound that technology allows us, which I'm sure a very good orchestrator also does that with balancing the different instrument. But there is something very sculptural with what technology allows us to create.
Hugh, as a conductor, orchestrator, are you also embracing the VST, the virtual sound plugins, blending with the acoustic living sound of a full orchestra?
Yeah, and in some way contributing to that through a couple of libraries that we have done. LCO has done with Spitfire Audio, and then one more recently with Native Instruments. And actually, there's the second one of those with Spitfire called LCO Textures. I remember we were chatting about this a moment ago. Emilie used quite a bit for the Forgotten Battle. And so we orchestrated the original material for the sample library. It was recorded, and then hearing it repurposed and sort of sculpted, molded into Emilie's arrangements, and then receiving those demos to orchestrate was a really lovely process. But it also reminded me how fastidious we need to be about the orchestration process when rendering quite complex, texturally and sort of spectrally complex Evo material, because by that point the composer is obviously very wedded to the way in which those Evos move and what they do for the how they please the director, and they've been signed off, and it's like, well, you don't want to mess with them, so we have to kind of apply this absolute notation approach. So even if it's just a single MIDI note, and think of something like the Oliver Arnold's Evos as well, there's actually a lot of richness to just one note, and so I feel it's our job as orchestrators and arrangers to make sure that that's faithfully transcribed on the page, so that in the session it's sounding as it should, but obviously it has a dynamism, a freshness because of the live players and the studio environment. But yeah, I mean, some of these samples are incredibly complex. And I worked on a library with Slater National Orchestral Tools where all derived from really incredible singular arresting synth material, and it had to be orchestrated for ensemble, and then it's giving the user the ability to blend between the two. And the idea is to hopefully create something where it's not really noticeable what's doing what. It sort of celebrates this ambiguity of space between electronic and acoustic spaces. So yeah, it's tough for us as orchestrators, but also it's a really exciting challenge. And when it works, it's very rewarding.
Has the orchestra's role in film music changed with the growing influence of electronics and sound design?
What do you think? Can I bat that one to Martin as a composer who's worked with so many orchestras?
Yeah, I mean, I think what orchestras are up against today is not only, I mean, this is going slightly off topic, but not only the sort of budgets aren't there, often they aren't there, but just the sort of standard process of getting a large amount of live players in a room and getting them to play this automatically, just because that's what you do on a big budget project, is not quite, the intention isn't quite there, and for good reason, because I think it's very familiar and it's been done very many times, and that kind of standard orchestral setup. So I think you have to be going into it trying to find a different way of recording a live. If you're putting an orchestra in a room, then it needs to be there for a purpose, and so it really helps if you can, and working with orchestrators if they're thinking that way too. I find it harder and harder sometimes to get orchestras into the idea of it. You have to really know what you're doing and have a real intention, not just like, let's book an orchestra because we can. And that's what they did in the past, basically, I think.
You think the way of composing has changed as well because of the introduction by plugins, VST, DAW, laptop, Amélie?
150%. I mean,
Imagine being like a composer in the 50s, having to like write everything, just bring the composer in your studio and be like, this is going to sound amazing, you just have to trust me while just playing thing on the piano.
We can't ever get away with the line of like, don't worry, wait until the recording day, it's going to sound great, don't worry.
Yeah.
That's never going to wash.
But at the same time, because we have VSTs that are quite inspiring, I mean, I think it's probably a positive the way it's changed. To be able to create mock-ups that are so realistic is very, very helpful. I mean, for me, in terms of the electronic wave, I think what's changed the most and what's the biggest challenge is when you add effects to instruments in post-production. It's just the stemming. You can't record things as a tutti. So you end up having to stem everything, and it creates recording sessions that are so abstract. Because even if you have all the musicians in the room, you actually never really hear the music as a whole, because you have to record everyone separately, everyone in turn. And that, I find that quite challenging, because that's my favorite part of the process, is when you have all the instrumentalists in the room and you get them like together to play the music. But that's the bit I wish we found better ways to add effects to live instruments.
I'm thinking of one of my favorite movies, Blade Runner, soundtrack by Vangelis, the legendary sound of the Yamaha CS80. I mean, this is a huge instrument. It has a very recognizable sound. If Bruce Springsteen uses it as well, you can know, this is a CS80. Is it a bit similar to using plugins, VST, like, hey, I recognize this sound, this might be this plugin? Maybe that's also challenging in a way.
I mean, I think that's the great thing about those old school, very, very outboard gear that's analog, basically. It's analog versus digital, and digital it's harder to be more distinctive. in the digital environment. I think it's not impossible at all, but it is harder. If you've got a literally a vibrating piece of electronics there in front of you, it feels like you can get something more vibrant out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, I mean, there's so many good sample libraries out there.
Yeah.
There's too many, really. It's just like you don't know where to start.
And thinking of that and sort of minimalism with a small m, I guess a lot of composers are understandably limited by the constraints of a budget, and as such, they are working with a smaller canvas. And if they can record solo piano and then color that with some really beautiful VSTs or some synth programming, then that's about being resourceful, as resourceful as possible within the parameters of the budget. And so that's, I guess, another form of minimalism, is where it's sort of by necessity rather than design. And I'm always staggered at how expansive composers can make scores with just very limited instruments being deployed, be it acoustic or electronic colors.
Looking back, minimalism in the 1960s, 1970s, it was actually a kind of reaction to the academic conservatory mathematical style of 12-tone technique, serialism. Would you say that minimalist film music today is also a kind of statement, a kind of reaction against a different kind of film composing?
I don't think it's a reaction in the same way as minimalist was to, serialism. It's just a style. It's just a taste. I don't think we're trying to be picking up a fight with John Williams.
Yeah. Martin?
No, not deliberately. It's partly because directors are increasingly trying. They're more aware that you have to tell stories in a slightly different way, and maybe a little more less manipulative, overtly manipulative way. And if you have a lot of music working very hard and doing a lot of things, it quite quickly exposes the drama as not being as good as it could be. And so directors really, if they know what they're doing, they're trying to use music very sparingly and intentionally.
Yeah.
And that's sort of quality very shared with minimalism. So it's sort of, they're natural bedfellows, but I don't think it's a conscious thing necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's perhaps quite a basic point, but it depends on how rich the dialogue is in a film. And so if it's really brimming with dialogue, the music needs to serve a different purpose. I feel odd like commenting on this in front of the composer actually do this, but just like as a punter, you can feel where there's that tension, when there's just too much activity in the music and there's really rich dialogue, and that needs to be the focus. And then thinking of, the first 20 minutes of There'll Be Blood, where there's no dialogue, and the music's role there is to give
and
a
almost
voice.
no effects either.
Exactly, and then you've got those beautiful shots of the hills, the mountainside, and Johnny Greenwood is deploying a large string section to sort of give voice to the expansiveness of those shots. And then you have those sort of character portraits where it's just Daniel Plainview and HW around a table, and then he's deploying chamber instruments. And it's such a simple technique, but it's so effective to be able to find that scale depending on what the action, what the film is doing and how it needs to be served.
Yeah, because sometimes as a composer you have to deal with a kind of limitation.
Time.
Yeah.
I mean, I never had exactly the budget I needed to do any project I've ever done. So you always have to find a way to make it work with the amount of money you have available to you.
Yeah.
For sure.
And also in terms of musical development, if you look at minimalist pioneers, let's talk about Music for 18 Musicians and C. Terry Riley, Einstein on the Beach, music with changing parts. It just goes on for hours. But this way of minimalism in film music is totally different, I guess. Maybe sometimes you want to go further with an idea, but you don't have the time in the editing process, or?
Yes. I mean, it would be nice to be able to go further sometimes, but also I like the constraints, really, of working to picture, and I like the fact that I'm limited in. It sounds strange, but that I'm limited in what I can do sometimes, because otherwise, being a proper blank page is respect, really. And that's why the Minimalists were so amazing, was because they could have done anything, and the movement at the time that they came out of was very much to do mad shit and just go more and further, and they didn't, and they resisted that temptation, and that's a real skill, which is great if you can employ in your own work. Really check whether what you're doing is necessary.
Mm-hmm. Talking about minimal music is also talking about a kind of musical reduction. in rhythm, repeating rhythms, reducing harmonic developments, reducing the melodies. What do you like focusing on your music, Amélie? Is it harmony? Is it rhythm? Is it melody?
It depends on the project, and I don't think I have the most intellectual process. I just respond quite emotionally to what feels right for that story, and what guides me is if I listen to it and I watch it with the picture, and it makes me feel the right way. So it's not like an active act of focusing on one part or another.
Yeah, I would second that. It's a very instinctive process, and I'm sure those composers we're talking about, it's completely instinctive for them as well. It's to a degree that you've always got to have a level of being instinctive in music, otherwise, because it's such a it's not a cerebral, thought-out process on the whole, and shouldn't be really. I don't think so. Yeah.
They often say, don't get inspired by your hero, but by your hero's hero. So don't listen to Philip Glass or Michael Nyman, but listen to their heroes. Do you have a favorite, let's say, classical composers? You were referring to Purcell, Mozart, the 17th century English music. Are you also inspired by the real Renaissance, Baroque, classical, Romantic period?
I mean, I like it. I like Bach a lot. But I don't know, do we know exactly who those guys were inspired by? Who are our heroes?
In Glass's
Yes.
case, well, if you talk about Nyman and the movie, favorite movie of Martin Phipps, it's really using these bass lines by Henry Purcell.
Like ostinatos.
Yeah, the ostinatos.
I was going to say Nadia Boulanger in terms of the influence that she had across so many artists, composed across such a wide range of styles and genres. I think she taught Philip Glass,
She taught
right?
Glass, Piazzolla, Quincy Jones.
I mean, just extraordinary.
Yeah. So do you have big heroes in the real classical repertoire?
Real classical, unbelievable.
Like in in the classical tradition of
Yeah,
Beethoven.
I love. No, I'm more like a Ravel, Debussy person. For me, in terms of like the orchestration and the harmonic language, they are, definitely my biggest inspiration.
Yeah. Martin?
I think I'm more naturally drawn to folk music or simple melodies or stuff that has a character, that comes from a place and has character. So, especially vocal stuff.
Yeah. You?
I'm a sort of choral nerd, so because I was a choir boy from the age of 7 and grew up singing English, Italian Renaissance polyphony, and so I kind of returned to that a lot. Palestrina, Bird, Tallis, Taverner, etc. Yeah.
In the shower.
Sorry? Yes.
You return to it in the shower.
Exactly. Tallis Sperminalium for 40 parts, and it would just me in the shower.
About electronic waves and minimalist film music, maybe we can say that minimal music was also the starting point of using an audio engineer, because all the instruments were amplified on stage. What are the challenges to work with an amplified orchestra, or like the concert of tonight? You have to find a balance between the electronics and the acoustics.
I mean, it just takes. It's a slightly different sound check.
Yeah.
Because on top of balancing the orchestra, you have to make sure the balance with because what I'm doing this evening, I'm going to have first chair violin and first chair cellist. They have like a DPA microphone, so contact microphone, that's coming into my sound card. I'm manipulating it, and then I'm sending it back to the engineer. So, it's just the technical things like feedback loop. We don't want to make, horrible sounds. But it's just a matter of having a little bit more time to adjust the levels and to work out the technical part. But just a little bit more time.
Martin, is there a...
I mean, there are people who are great at writing music for a live space, and I love writing music in studios, and it comes together from putting together elements and balance, and the balance is so crucial. So it's a challenge going all live, trying to do something all live or with a little bit of backing in there. So yeah, it's but hopefully you get something unexpected.
Mhm.
You know, that's the thing about live music, and it may well be unexpected tonight.
Hugh, how's your experience with rehearsals of contemporary film music using lots of ambient sounds, electronic soundscapes?
Yeah, well, I suppose I would think immediately of Emilie Levie's Under the Skin, doing that live, because the way that it's mixed, the kind of hybrid color that she creates through synths and real strings, is so specific in the soundtrack. And so that's always a challenge, just to make sure that we're getting as close as possible to that, but also embracing the fact that it is a live performance. And then there's the percussive aspect to it, with all that programmed percussion, which is like very ominous, animalistic, and just making sure that that has the right definition and force. So it's usually those kind of considerations in a live context.
Amélie and Martin, what's your favorite part in the whole process of working on a score? Is it being in the studio? Is it giving the first drafts to the crew? Is it having these talks? Is it having live concerts with your music like tonight? What is it?
Recording sessions. Yeah.
Yeah?
Having other musicians playing your music, that's the best feeling, for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Also, getting the job and delivering it.
I can imagine that it's sometimes very stressful because the time from the recording sessions is very limited. So it's, I think it's being very well prepared and.
Yeah, I find the sort of darkest hour just before I'm going to do a big recording session, and the doubt is very strong there. And then, as you say, it usually works out fantastically, and it's just breathes new life into everything, and so that can be a lovely process.
What did you already explore with using electronics, and what would you like to explore even more in the near future?
I'm way behind the curve, and I've just discovered outboard synths. So I just want to spend time just with me and this little funny keyboard and lots of knobs. I'm not sure I'll get it. I've just done a score that's kind of pretty much that. So I did get a chance to do that, and that was really fun, and amazed about, as I say, the vibrancy of something properly analog. There in front of you, and the performance you can get out. It becomes a performance just playing it live, programming it live, and you can never recreate it, and it's just a moment in time, and you can record it, but you can't then go back to it. So that's what I would like to be spending my time on.
Amélie?
Slippery slope. You start with one analog synth, and then the second later you have like 7. I'd love to have an opportunity to work with soloists more, because I can only really play the piano, and I just feel like the possibility of sounds manipulated by effects. I'd love to see what we can get with a clarinet when we apply it to saxophone, to like all sorts of different instruments. But yeah, I'd need to find instrumentalists who are willing to collaborate on this, because it's all instruments I can't play.
Is this also the attitude that you're having when you're starting a new score? Like, I haven't done this before, so this is a new chance to.
Yeah, I mean, if it fits with the film, yes, I'll take the opportunity to try a new sound. I think it's part of the fun, actually, to write film score, is to try to discover a sound world that is as much as possible unique to this film. And manipulating sounds or analog synthesizer, like the way you can shape the sound so precisely is a really good place to create a unique sound for this film.
Yeah. How did your musical style already evolve in terms of electronic minimalist film music?
I think I involve synthesizer a lot more, and I'm getting into arpeggios. You know, the arpeggiator, like when you have a really good arpeggiator, you can really go full minimalist, but creating really interesting short patterns and applying them to unexpected synth sound. You can really that actually brings me closer to early minimalism.
Martin, how did your musical style change? How do you look back? How do you look forward?
It doesn't. It's not a constant line in going in any direction. It's a random. No, it's just whatever. It's kind of catching my eye at the time, or what I'm. Also, what you're allowed to do. We work in quite a constricted world, but it's always. I've always thought about. It's always about being mixing in other stuff, and it's never just about the live stuff for me. So it hasn't felt like a. That's not a journey that I've been doing that forever. So. I hope. I hope that continues to reap rewards.
Yeah. Hugh, I can imagine working with those film composers. They create soundtracks. They compose soundtracks. It's using the studio actually also as an instrument. Must be for you very exciting to translate the studio experience to a live stage.
Yeah, it really is, and just drawing on all the combined talents of the players, the composer, the engineer, the director, who's often in the room with us as well, giving us guidance and notes. But I mean, with most of those composers, they really hand it over to the director hands over that responsibility to compose, and it's like it's their space, and they run the show. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, every recent project, there's been a slightly different way that we've physically laid out the orchestra depending on the requirements of the score. And one of the most exciting parts of the process is working with an artist who comes from maybe an electronic or something like non-orchestral background. It's their first score working with an orchestra, and we're very lucky that we, as LCO, often get the call to collaborate with those artists and kind of help guide them through the process and try and dismantle any perceived barriers around working with an orchestra for the first time if they're not proficient in like traditional notation, and it's just using other forms of language to allow that process to work in the best possible way. And they're providing us with this incredible electronic material, and it's such a treat to then be able to try and render that for large orchestral forces or indeed chamber forces or whatever it is. And it's a constant challenge, but like an incredibly exciting and rewarding one. And so the best part of that process is when it is clicking, and then you look into the control room, you see a happy composer and a happy director. That's when it's all locking in. That's very cool. Yeah.
I think as a composer as well, a film composer, in a way you can also be specialized in the way of recording music. How is it in the studio? Is it also discussing with the engineer, I want small condenser mics on the piano, I want large condenser mics, I want this kind of reverb because I've used this one in my demos. How is this? How are these dialogues in creating the ultimate recording?
Yeah, I wouldn't get too technical about what mics they were going to use necessarily, but definitely you're trying to push stuff, and often it's like, oh, I heard this technique somewhere, and could we try and take that and apply it to this? And it's but it's also about bringing other people in who've got great ideas. I mean, that's really, really handy, and it's like privileged to work with someone like you who will bring a whole load of new ideas to the table and approaches. So. Yeah, we're just trying to get the cues written and approved, and then how they're taken forward is it's great to have some help with that.
Emilie?
Yeah, I mean, I just have a collaborative conversation with the engineer, and what sound I'm trying to achieve, what I'm going to do with the recordings, and then I just let them do their job. They're much more knowledgeable on that stuff than I will ever be. So.
Okay. We still have about 10 minutes left for some questions from the audience. There's a microphone. We can throw the microphone. It's a very special one. So, who has a question about electronic waves, minimalist film music? Question for Martin, Amélie, or Hugh? Don't be shy. Yes. Catch it.
Hello. So a really interesting thing that I'm seeing, but also interested to hear, a great thing about being around lots of other composers is hearing their experiences. And I feel like there's a trend, and you might have touched on this earlier, that we're using less melodic material, using less leitmotifs and things like that in scores, or they're becoming quite simple. When you think about main themes and like big blockbuster movies are becoming very simple themes, and it's turning more towards sonic identity. And I'm wondering what your experience is working on multiple projects, if you find that there is a trend either in general or perhaps because that your style kind of warrants that kind of score, they want that kind of score, because yeah, I've heard lots of composers saying, yeah, people are wanting less melodies. But then in the last project I did, the exec was very keen to have melodies throughout. And obviously each project will be different, but it would be great to hear what you've experienced and what your thoughts are on that.
I mean, it's the vision of the director, right, or the showrunner, or whoever's really in charge. And if they've got a singular idea about how they want everything to come together, that's always just so great for a composer, as long as they're not being too restrictive. But in terms of the use of melody, yes, I would agree with you. I think people find it harder and harder. It's you've heard it so many times. You've heard little melodies for characters, literally walk in the room and their melody starts, and that can still work though. But it's kind of almost like you need to do it knowing with the history of everything that's come before it. If you use it self-consciously, it can work, I think. But just having melody for the sake of melody doesn't, just because it's a beautiful tune doesn't mean it's right for the project or going to have any resonance. And in fact, it will often feel too much. But then again, if you just have texture, can be very boring, and it depends how it's featured. It's a real bugbear of mine how music is used in the actual program, whether it's really featured and. You described the beginning of There Will Be Blood. I mean, it's so intentional what they're doing, rather than just sticking a blanket of something underneath the score. And then you'll get a lot of texture stuff, and then a director will come back and say, "Yeah, look, I just want a simple melody. So it's just comes and goes. There'll always be melodies."
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right in terms of the shift, and both of you are right. I don't think we have a motive per character anymore. I still have a lot of people who want a theme or a longer melody that goes for the whole show or for the whole film, but it's more like sound palettes per character and then an overarching melody. But, there's also the reality that not all film even have a space for that one cue that's going to be a big, bold, beautiful, evolving melody, because sometimes the longest cue you're going to have that's not between bits of dialogue is going to be 45 seconds, and you can't really establish anything in there. While the opening of There Will Be Blood is just every composer's dream, where you can just create this beautiful, very striking piece of music, but not all projects have that. Yeah.
Other questions?
This is sort of a general question of your palette. Today, there being so many plugins and creating textures reminiscent of analog gear. Do you use any vintage analog gear within your palette of sounds, either pedals, effects pedals, loopers, analog tape, anything like that? Or is it just primarily DAW, 100% DAW, 90% DAW, 10%? If you get my question.
Cat that I've had for the past 15 years, and I use on pretty much everything. Just for that. Even if I don't even put a delay on it, and it's just running through that tape loop, just to get this kind of degradation of the sound. Yeah. I think collecting vintage analog is another way to just bring a bit of life and unpredictability. Even if you're just literally adding it to a virtual instrument or a synth, it's just going to give it that much more reality to it.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I mean, but it is hard in the process. I mean, just our time scales, and you need to be able to recall stuff. You need to be able to change it quickly and edit it up. And if you're, as I say, if you're having a marvelous one time only performance on a piece of vintage analog gear, you can't get that back. So
Is your phone camera photos just like
Oh yeah, the
endless
settings.
photographs
Yeah,
of settings?
settings. Yeah, like you're ever going to go back
Yeah.
to those.
Well, you try sometimes, and it still doesn't sound the same.
No,
yeah.
exactly.
I guess like very, very vintage with the orchestra, with like 300-year-old wooden
Ah, yeah,
boxes
nice,
with
yeah.
strings and horsehair, but just working with composers who are constantly pushing the sounds that those particularly string instruments can create. I think like Kaya Sariaho or Penderecki, just trying to emulate electronic processes through purely acoustic means. So you've still got that same color of the original, but then it's packed with this human expression and that kind of physicalization of electronic sound. That's incredibly exciting.
Maybe a last question. Sorry, we're using the microphone. Yeah.
Hugh, you were talking about analog gear. I was wondering if you have ever tried to use AI in your composition, and if so, how you use it.
Right. I mean, not. Yeah, no. I mean, it's the question, isn't it? I mean, I was hoping that. Yeah, we need to start using AI before it just uses us. We need to use it, but I don't consciously. And although the programs, I mean, the latest version of Logic has got some stuff in it that's incredible in terms of what it can do, and that's a step above. It's a step into doing something for you, which you couldn't have done before. And so it's creeping in, even if we're not consciously using it. But it would be better to take an active role. I don't know if have either of you two messed around with it? I mean, really seen what it can do for you?
Not yet, but I do feel like it has to remain a tool. But I can imagine that it could become an interesting creative tool, as long as it's not just made to emulate what people already make, which is kind of lazy and boring. But we use AI to expand into realms that we are not capable of doing. Then I'd be interested to know how we can use it to create more different and new sounds. I'd use it, but if it's just to avoid having to hire a musician, then I'm not into it. No.
We just had 2 questions. Maybe if we still have 1 minute for 2 short questions. On the front row, you were, and
Hi. I was just wondering, in terms of the trend that's also emerged in the last few years, where music and score has become a lot more wall-to-wall in films and in series. I think especially in, certain streamers have a tendency to just kind of lay it in really thick. Do you feel like that's affected how you orchestrate for your scores, because you're very aware that you don't want something that's too dense the whole way through? Or do you tend to just fight for silence with the director and the editor?
Silence, yeah.
Fight for silence.
And you don't need to fight. You can just tell them the scene is so strong it doesn't need music.
Yeah, it's so good already. Yeah, I would just say in terms of process, I think quite often, because everything is done in the edit, our music goes into the edit, it all becomes presentable very quickly for the sake of for the execs on the project, that there is a tendency just that music will go in really early on, and it will get to a stage where people won't even have seen it ever without music on it, or certainly the execs won't. And so there's almost no questioning of the fact that there's all this music on there. And I think that's part of the composer's role to question that, and it's not like I don't want to, I don't want to write you music. It sounds odd saying you won't do something, but it's important sometimes. It's like, let's try this without.
Yeah. Especially where there's temp. I think that's in from early
Completely,
on.
yeah. I mean, it's incredible. So I mean, again, the last thing I did, I got out about 70% of the temp. We went down to about 30% score from what they had when they locked picture. So yeah, that felt. But it was because they were willing to listen. They were up for it. Yeah. And it wasn't working. If the music wasn't helping, you could tell it wasn't really working. So.
Okay, the ultimate last question.
It was just a question about your deliverables when you're a performer on the soundtrack. are they WAV files, or is it MIDI files, or if it's a file in Sibelius where you hand over like the sheet music? Depends on whatever project.
It's depending on the stage. If when I'm sending to an orchestrator, I will be sending a mix of MIDI and audio files, depending on what the orchestrator prefer to use as orchestration. Then that's going to be turned into score and parts for the musician to perform. And from there, we move into WAV file, audio files, in stereo, and then there'll be a 5:1 mix, and that gets sent into the dub for the film.
Enjoy the concert tonight with your music, and best of luck with your music and upcoming projects. Thank you very much. Emilie Levienaise-Farrouch, Martin Phipps, Hugh, Tieppo-Brunt. Thank you so much.
Thank you.